Welcome everyone to the Service Lounge. I am your host, Brandon Nixon, and with me today, I have back from a long time, Christian Eagon, my co-host, joining me today. Christian, how you doing, man? Thanks for
Good,
jumping
man.
on again.
I'm back, like you said. I've been MIA for a little bit.
Both of us. It's been a little while since
Yeah.
we came out with a new episode. I know last month we did like a rerun, and then this month, I'm really excited about this month because for those of you guys who are listening on, if you haven't been around a year, last year our first episode was all around the customer complaints and the top 10 customer complaints for 2024 that we saw. And so for this episode, our main topic, we're going to be talking about the top 10 customer complaints for 2025 and see what's changed, what it used to be, and talk a little bit about that and even dive into real customer comments regarding it. So for everybody joining on, thank you guys for the support. Excited to go through today, but Christian, first off, let's talk about the state of the industry.
Yeah.
This start of this year has been absolutely crazy. It's been ups and downs in automotive and the unknowns with the tariffs. And what are you seeing with dealers that you've been working with on their uncertainty of this year?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, a lot of hesitation, right? Tariffs, and then now no tariffs and then more tariffs, and it's kind of switching around, which is creating some uncertainty. But at the same time, it's really allowing dealers and fixed ops managers, service managers, and the service departments to focus in on their process really and improve things because, maybe their RO counts down or, whatever it may be, but they can supplement that in different ways by having a better customer experience, really taking photos and videos and, increasing their dollars per RO to offset some of the uncertainty that's out there right now.
Yeah. Well, you said it best too regarding like RO count. We've seen a lot of stores RO count and the volume of ROs is starting to decline and has declined over the last few months.
Yep.
But if you're capitalizing on those ROs and your dollars per RO are increasing, you shouldn't see a decline from there, right?
Yeah.
Which is why I think, to your point, a focus on guest experience and what customers are expecting when they come into your service drive. And there's that old saying that sales sells the first car, service sells the second, and beyond.
Yeah.
And that's exactly why we're here, right? But the only way you make it good for those customers is if you listen to the feedback that they give you, right? I think that's one thing that we all fail to do in any company, but is listening to the negative feedback. We focus on all the positives and don't address those negatives, which is why today is super crucial. So like I said last year, we put out a review, and I'm going to highlight the top 10 from 2024 first, and then we can talk a little bit about it. And then I'll go into what's changed and what our top 10 feedbacks of negative comments were for this year. And for those of you who don't know, we get thousands and thousands of feedback that we analyze each year. So this analyzation for this year is over 6 months, so January 1st to June 30th. All of the negative customer comments, and then we trend them. We see what are the topics and the main trends from there. So let's highlight what we saw last year. So last year we saw the top 10 were number 1, long wait times. Number 2, issues with scheduling appointments. Number 3 was overcharged. Number 4 was rude staff. 5 was incomplete service. 6 was poor communication. 7 was poor service quality. 8 was dirty vehicle. 9 was a misdiagnosis of the problem. And then number 10 was lack of transportation options, which when we reviewed this last year, it seemed pretty on point. Everybody was like, yeah, no, I totally get it. And I'll be honest with you, I was expecting this year to kind of repeat what we saw last year just because of everything that's been going on.
Yeah.
Which is, to be expected, especially customers are keeping their cars longer because they're not buying new cars as often, right?
Yep.
So. All right, so let's dive into the top 10 for this year. And to my surprise, number 1, which normally is wait time, we see that over the years consistently, is repairs not being solved and not being fixed right the first time, which kind of threw me for a loop because it's majority, like 50% of the comments compared to the next, which is like 12%. So why do you think repairs not solved and not being fixed right the first time is happening?
I think it's a couple of different things. One, right, there's older vehicles being brought in more consistently. Yeah. The age is getting older and older. And I think one of the key areas, and we've heard dealers bring this up to us, and how can we help them with that is, I bring my vehicle into you and I explain what I think the problem is, right?
Yeah.
And you as the advisor kind of, takes that, passes it along to the tech, and then the tech is looking to try and figure out what it is. So I think a lot of the time it could be a misunderstanding of maybe the problem to begin with, and they're chasing something completely else, or completely different. I think the other thing could be is the they're trying to get so much done, right? The techs are trying to go from one car to another, especially when they're busy, that it could be some sort of, just rushing to get the car in and get another car on their rack, where they're either missing it, they didn't completely finish or check the, whatever the diag or diagnosis was to get it finished or resolved all the way.
Well, I think both of your points ring true, right? We constantly hear from technicians that like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to solve this problem. Look at this comment that I got from the advisor. And the advisor's comment says something like, weird noise, right rear. And it's like, okay, well, that gives me everything. Like, were they driving at a certain speed? Was it, when the car started up? Like, give me more detail so I can figure it out, right? That's a constant complaint. That trying to solve that communication barrier from the customer to the advisor to the technician, it's a game of telephone. It's like, what did they tell you? Okay, and then what's going to be communicated to the technician? But I do agree with you with RO counts being down. Technicians are trying to get vehicles in and out as quickly as possible, right? I think that ties to pay plans as well. Like, we want to make sure that these technicians, they're worried about their paychecks going down, so they're trying to pump through as many cars as possible. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen a technician that did an inspection and all they did was just walk real quick, mark something on their hand, and then put it into an MPI and move forward. And it's like, no, did they thoroughly inspect the vehicle? And great, you inspected it. That's probably not going to highlight the customer's comment that they just brought up, right?
Yeah. Well, and you touched on it, right? And it might not be a majority of these repairs not being resolved or coming back up, but customer brings the car in for something small, let's say, right? And the tech's not doing the MPI, even though they have the car there, they're fixing a minor issue. They're not doing an MPI on that vehicle to maybe find out something that's become an issue when the person drives home or the next day, right? So it wasn't an issue. You glossed over it as a technician or didn't check everything, and then it is an issue. So it might be completely unrelated, and the timing might just be impeccable, and could be that.
Absolutely. So let's dive into the next. I'm going to name off the rest of them, and then we'll dive in because I want to kind of compare, which I thought was interesting here. But number 2, behind not being fixed right the first time, is poor communication, no follow-up. That's pretty standard. We usually see that on this list no matter what, because advisors and people would just fail keeping customers informed. Number 3, which was surprising, car wash expectations. And almost the equal amount of comments compared to poor communication is that they didn't get their car washed, which I thought that was crazy. Broken promises or missed deadlines was number 4. Slow routine maintenance was number 5. Scheduling communication and confusion was number 6. Tire-related oversights was number 7. Extended wait times with no updates was number 8, which kind of ties to number 2, right? Number 9 was language barriers, and then number 10 was pushy or unnecessary service recommendations. The one that kind of threw me off here was the fact that poor communication jumped from 6 up to number 2, right? And then long wait times dropped from number 1 down to number 6. So what that tells me is that because they're having poor communication, they're more focused on the poor communication than it taking so long, right? Those usually go hand in hand. Customers are okay with things taking a little while if you keep them updated, but if you don't keep them updated, then that becomes the biggest problem that they're feeling, while their vehicle's getting serviced and why they don't want to bring it to a dealer. Yeah.
Well, and we talked about this last time, right? Poor communication and no follow-up we have on its own at number 2, but out of the next 7, over half of them could be resolved or are due to some sort of lack of communication, lack of expectations. So they're all specific but related. Most are related, except the either the slow maintenance or tire related oversights. Everything else is somewhat related to the communication aspect of the whole process.
Absolutely. One of the ones that I didn't expect to be at the top of the list was car wash expectations. that totally threw me for a loop because I know customers, like, we see the complaints of like, oh, I brought my vehicle in and then when I picked it up, it's dirty, right? But a lot of the comments, like, I'll give you a couple examples. First comment is they promised to wash and it came back filthy. Said it would be cleaned, it wasn't. Left my seats dirty and windows streaky. There was even grease on my steering wheel. Washing the car used to be a standard, now it feels optional. Which, we're in California, so washing a car, we know that that's kind of removed, because of our drought incidents we've had over the years. But customers are now expecting that if I'm going to spend the dollar amounts that I'm spending at a dealership, you can't give me just a basic wash on the outside of my car before I pick it up. I think that's what I'm hearing from the industry right now.
Yeah, and they want that level of service, right? And I think the bigger issue that is just with this one specifically is the customer experience and what they're expecting, right? Okay, you give me a car wash or you don't give me a car wash. Well, let me know what you're going to do when I drop my car off so I don't have a misaligned expectation when I pick it up. But the bigger thing is, and we see this a lot, is just the small details that customers pick up on when there's grease on their steering wheel or the porter didn't put a floor mat down and there's dirt now in their car. Like the techs and everyone involved needs to take care of the customer's vehicle because this could easily turn someone off and they go somewhere else just because they didn't like a little bit of grease somewhere or whatever it may be. Now they're going to go look somewhere else. And it's a small thing that's easily correctable.
Absolutely. Well, it's like at a restaurant, right? We heard it today. I was at the Lexus Guest Experience, and one of the speakers was all about hospitality, and he had mentioned that, like, cologne, for instance. He's like, if one of my waiters or waiters walks through, a showroom or whatever it might be and is wearing a heavy cologne that maybe puts off one person, they may have walked through with a smile, everything was great, but then they just left a trail of just a bad smell that somebody didn't like, and they're probably never coming back to my restaurant again, right? Very similar to a small little thing such as just wiping down the window when they walk in, right? So it's not dirty or whatever it might be. That can make a difference of whether that customer is going to stay. Focus on the experience they're going to have and the courtesy you're going to give them, and they'll continue to show up, especially when, let's just call it what it is, the pricing of getting your vehicle serviced is becoming more and more expensive. With tariffs coming into the market, they say it's going to make it even more expensive because of parts and all of that. So we got to kind of give them what's in it for me when I'm spending that much money.
Yeah, it's the little things add up, right? And if you're not, and you said it earlier, right? Listening to your customers' feedback is very important. If you're hearing about these things, you have to act on it right away as a manager or something, so it doesn't become a bigger and bigger problem. I mean, some of these aren't the easiest things to just fix overnight, right? But if you're aware of them, you're listening to your customers, then you can put a plan of action in place to actually get them solved and have an improvement in those areas.
Absolutely. So the one comment I want to highlight, and I'm going to actually pull this up on my side, which I was surprised. It went from number 2 last year, which was appointment wait times, right, and issues with scheduling appointments, and dropped. That was number 2 and dropped all the way down to number 6. Now, there's a few things that I think are addressing this as why it's not number 2 anymore, right? It's not majority of the comments. I think we've seen a lot of the OEMs, especially on our side, push providers like ourselves, like Update Promise and other providers, to improve that scheduling experience, right? Even, like I said, I was just at the Lexus Guest Experience Summit, and one of the biggest complaints they saw last year was regarding scheduling, right? Customers having issues with scheduling. So we saw that as a problem. The OEM saw it as a problem, and now there's been a lot of fixes and changes. We personally did close to a 40% click reduction on our online service scheduler, which we saw higher increased amount of appointments and higher show rates because we made it more transparent. I think that shows that we dropped it from number 2 down to number 6. It's great to see. But, the long waits also dropping. I think part of it is customers, when I saw last year, a lot of the comments is I called in and I was being transferred left and right. Nobody was answering the phone. I was trying to schedule an appointment. The person who I was scheduling with didn't know what to do, blah, blah, blah. We're seeing more and more dealers take advantage of AI tools like our Harmony AI tool and getting appointments booked like that. So
Yep.
the appointment issues dropping down, I definitely see that happening more and more as AI gets more involved into this process, because all the customer wants to do is know that they can come in at a certain time.
Yeah, it's whether people are, a lot of times we used to see complaints, right, of no one answering the phones, or they're just ringing, especially during like the middle of the day, closer to the end of the day. And like you said, AI can help with that, and make it so the customer is able to, even if it's not a person, I'm able to figure out when I can bring my car in and get that scheduled. And it definitely helps in this scenario.
For sure. The other one that was not on the list last year, but it's on, is tire related oversights. I'm sure when you saw that, you were like, wow,
Yeah,
I'm surprised. But just to read off a few of the comments so people, can hear, some of the comments that are highlighted, they forgot to check my tire pressure again. The tire pressure light was still on when I left. No mention of a tire rotation, even though it was requested. Tire alignment was off and no one said anything. Frustrating when tire issues are skipped, right?
Yep.
One area that I think the industry's always tried to solve, especially regarding tires, is when customers are going, well, my tires grew, right? I dropped it off. I've gone nowhere else. And you told me originally they were at like 430 seconds, and now they're at 630 seconds. Like, how is that a thing? The fact that we don't believe that is being paid attention to blows my mind. Like, the dealers are like, oh yeah, well, that's a once in a rarity. Like, customers don't pay attention to that. No, that is an absolute, because then they know, are you really inspecting the vehicle or not? And you can really get yourself in trouble as a dealership if something happens and they get hurt. Next thing they know, like, it showed that the tire was the main issue,
Yeah. It's the completing the MPI thoroughly. It's being diligent and slowing down to speed up, right? Take your time, get everything done accurately, and then, move on. But if you're getting, if you have a certain couple individuals or people that, aren't being as diligent as they should be, it can, definitely get themselves and the dealer in trouble, especially if, tires are not being measured accurately. TPMS lights are still on when the customer leaves. Those are pretty simple things, again, to make sure that they're being checked, taken care of, and brought up to the customer when the customer's at the dealership.
So it's funny. Our Western sales director, Steven, I was just speaking with him this week because he was at the event with me, and he shared with me an experience. He brought his Jeep into a Jeep dealership, and he mentioned to them that, hey, I'm hearing a weird, noise when I come into my driveway, right? And the right side, when my tire hits, it's like a clunk that wasn't there before. Can you guys just take a look at it, right? And, he gets his car, or they call him, tell him it's all ready or whatever it might be. Everything looks good, blah, blah, blah. And then he looks at the tires, and it's like, oh, all of the tires are the same exact measurement. And he instantly was like, well, I don't trust that, because I just replaced one of my tires brand new last week because I popped, I got a nail in it. They popped it, replaced that tire. So I know that tire is brand new. All the rest of them have close to 40,000 miles on them. And it's like, so if I can't trust that, then how am I going to trust that the issue that I explained to you was even inspected, right? Now, he is from the industry and is able to go to the manager and say, like, hey, here's what's going on. But he only knew to look that up because he's in the industry. Like, how many more of these issues are happening at dealers and nobody's knowing that their technicians are just overlooking it and not doing anything with it, right?
Yeah, it's a huge concern, right? And we say it all the time, right? Inspect what you expect. As the managers of the dealership, as shop foreman, service manager, fixed ops directors, everyone needs to work together to make sure that everyone along the way of the process is doing what they should and doing it accurately, right? And caring about it, because if not, it's your customer that comes in and gets, all four tires are the same. Well, no, they're not. That's not a good experience, and it just is something that, shouldn't, it's going to be a factor, but shouldn't be as big as a factor, right? Of, just neglecting what's there right in front of you, basically.
So the other area that I saw that wasn't on the list before and I thought was quite interesting was the language barriers, and specifically Spanish.
Yeah.
That a lot of the comments, had to bring my son in to translate for me. We needed someone who speaks Spanish. No one could explain these repairs to my father because they didn't speak Spanish, which I don't know about you, Christian, but when we grew up, it was all about like, hey, you either, especially because we grew up in California, but we know around the nation, you either learn Spanish because when you go to a job and you go to apply for a job, like knowing Spanish helps. But
Yep.
how in a dealership do you not have somebody who's able to translate that? And then if you don't, like, are you making sure you have tools that are able to help you with that translation over there, right? So that you can provide that. But I definitely thought it was interesting because when I saw language barriers, I was like, okay, maybe some like Asian languages. No, it is mainly Spanish speaking languages and not having good translations there.
And I think, it could be different parts of the country, right? Or different areas struggling with this more than others. If you go to a dealership here in Southern California, there's at least, 99% of the time, one or two Spanish speakers or one and two, Asian speakers. But I think in some other areas, it might not be that easy to hire them or find them. So it's something to think about as a dealership of making sure that you're able to, help your customers out no matter really what they speak, especially, Spanish as we see here. And then you see some of the stuff like for some of us to look at, right? If they don't understand what they're seeing, English paperwork couldn't read. Well, if you only have the option to print in English, that's not good. But if you're able to send it to them electronically and their phone can help with some of the converting of it, then then that's how you get over that barrier of, just English paperwork.
Absolutely. The last one on the list from last year that's no longer on this list, and it comes to me as no surprise, is no shuttle service or lack of transportation options. I think we as dealers in automotive have figured this out. Either we're doing pickup and drop off. The OEMs are pushing that, right? Pick up and drop off. We're now providing other options like Uber and Lyft and things like that. There's tools like Hop Drive and stuff like that help and provide different opportunities and options. So, it's been a big push in the last couple of years. It's good to see that that's dropped off of our top 10 list because it's just it's an area that customers shouldn't have to worry about, especially when they're bringing in vehicles for recalls and like what's going on. We're starting to see more OEMs come out with more rental programs on their own because they manage those fleets. Why do they not have rental programs? It just would make sense. So it's definitely been a shift that I think has resulted in a positive customer experience here.
Yeah, it's good to see that one, fall off. And it's the amount of ways you can, whether it's shuttles or, Uber and Lyft and ride services, that all those come into play. There's no way a customer should feel like they're stuck at a dealership and they can't get to either back home or where they need to be, right?
Yep.
So that's good to see that one falling off the list.
Where the industry's at today, I think, like I said, we've been saying it, new car sales margins are thinning out. We're starting to see customers are holding their vehicles longer, right? The statistics there are proven. They're holding them longer because they can't afford them. Interest rates are still high. They're not going down from what we're seeing at the moment. And vehicle prices are still very expensive. So when they keep their vehicle longer, what do? They get their vehicle serviced more, right? So anybody who's listening on, that's why we're doing not only this podcast, but why we focus our business on fixed operations is because this is where everything is going to lead to that customer to choose to do business with you continuously in the future or not. If you don't focus on that guest experience, when they've got a car that's 8 years old and they bring it in, they got to be able to trust you, right? They got to feel you're going to communicate with them. They got to feel that they're going to have a good customer experience, or else, guess what? There's plenty other options, right?
Yep.
One statistic I'll mention here that I had actually sent over to my team this week, and I'm going to pull this up on my phone, but directly from Lexus on their side. So let me just pull this up real quick. It was talking about the defection rate of customers on Lexus's side from the first few years to the next few years, right? And it's a huge percentage of customers dropping off. I want to say it was like from the first couple years of service to that third year of service, it was like 70% of those consumers started to drop off, right? So we have to wow them in those first couple years, and not just expect the OEM to give you programs to wow them, right? You have to set yourself aside as a dealer to make sure that you're retaining those customers over time. Right?
Yeah.
Vehicles are only getting harder and harder to service and more expensive. Now we got to set a difference maker when they show up to your dealer.
Yeah. And like all these are, control the things that you can control, right? Control the small things that you can make sure the car's clean when the customer picks it back up. Make sure you're communicating with the customer, providing them new updates. I think it's all about constant improvement. And we know how hard it is at a dealership with so much going on, and it's not easy communicating all the time with customers and internally with external. But if you can focus on constant improvement of the small things and work on it and hold everyone accountable, it definitely goes a long way with improving a lot of these items.
Absolutely. Well, Christian, I appreciate you jumping on here. And for everybody listening on, we will be putting links for the top 10 comments that we found. And before I let you guys know, one of the areas, I know we made a video on it not too long ago, but the one highlight I want to leave everybody with is each year there's an organization called the Consumer Federation of America where they do an analysis of all industries and which industries have the top customer complaints. Last year, we highlighted this on this exact episode last year when we talked about complaints. And automotive last year for 8 years in a row was the #1 customer complaint industry. And I hate to say it, but for 9 years in a row, we are still the #1 industry. We'll link that in here so that you guys can take a look at it. But that just goes to show that we all have to do our part in making a change into this and listen to our customers' feedback, right? Like these top 10 that we're going to share out. This is crucial for you to look at your service department, look at your overall dealership and say, okay, what am I doing to resolve at a minimum the top 5 items, because those are what customers are seeing day in and day out, and analyze your own feedback. That's my big recommendation to everyone. So Christian, again, thank you for jumping on. This is a great overview, and I look forward to doing this next year and seeing a bunch of different changes. So
thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. We'll see you next month.